Is the UFC secretly fast-tracking Sugar Sean O'Malley? Sean O'Malley is set to take on Petr Yan at UFC 280. As awesome as that sounds, some fans think O'Malley is undeserving of this matchup, while others believe Petr Yan would defeat Sugar Sean in a heartbeat. But the big question we can't help but ask, does Sugar Sean O'Malley get a title shot if he defeats Petr Yan? There's a whole lot of controversy surrounding this fight, but we've got all the juicy details, so don't go anywhere because we're just getting started. Earlier this year, the UFC made probably the craziest card we've seen in a long time. It's a card like UFC 280 that makes you so happy to be a fan of the sport. With Islam Makhachev vs Charles Oliveira standing as the main event, UFC 280 will definitely be a barn burner. But in between the applause to Team Dana White for making such a stacked card, some fans don't seem to like one fight on the main card, which features Petr Yan and Sugar Sean O'Malley. Now why is that so? Well, first of all, the number one reason why this matchup feels off is the difference in their rankings. Sugar Sean is currently ranked number 12 in the bantamweight division, while Petr Yan, who is the former champion, is ranked number 1. Take a moment here and think about that. When in the history of the sport have we ever seen a guy below the top 10 or even the top 5 rankings take on the number 1 ranked guy? There might be a few similar instances here and there, but it hardly ever happens. From the UFC's point of view, they seem like they're trying something new with the way they matchmake the fights. That's why we almost saw Khamzat Chimaev, who is ranked number 3 in the welterweight division, take on Nate Diaz, who wasn't even ranked. The point is, we can't say for sure whether or not the UFC is giving Sean O'Malley a huge leap, but what we do know is that this fight will be a huge test of his strength. Petr Yan doesn't need to prove himself. We've seen his execution against Jose Aldo, against Uriah Faber, against Corey Sandhagen. The list goes on and on. This fight just seems like the perfect way for Yan to make a comeback, after losing his title to Aljamain Sterling. On the other hand, Sugar Sean has a lot to lose and a lot to gain if he either loses or wins this fight. If Sean O'Malley loses to Petr Yan, the hype around him being the next big thing in the UFC might go down. But if he can pull off a victory that night, man, Sugar Sean O'Malley might get a title shot next. It's not a certainty though. The UFC might test him out one more time with another fighter before giving him a title shot. Let's also not forget that there's Aljamain Sterling versus TJ Dillashaw also taking the co-main event spot on the UFC 280 card. If Aljamain Sterling successfully defends his title against TJ Dillashaw, then the UFC might set a Sugar Sean versus TJ Dillashaw fight to determine the number 1 contender for the title. Can you even imagine how phenomenal a Sugar Sean versus TJ Dillashaw fight would be? Or a Sugar Sean versus Aljamain Sterling fight? But these are all speculations. For all we know, Petr Yan might win, and win dominantly. At least that's what his record shows us. But on the flip side, Sugar Sean's record doesn't stand out when compared. There's a famous saying that you're just as good as your last fight. And for Sean, his last fight doesn't speak much volume. He faced Pedro Munoz at UFC 276 back in July 2022. The fight got called off after Sean accidentally poked Pedro's eye, making Pedro unable to compete. This happened in the second round, but according to how the judges scored the first round, Sugar Sean was losing the bout. 2 out of 3 judges scored the contest 10-9 in favor of Pedro. The fighters Sean O'Malley faced before entering the UFC don't really stand out, but we can't take away the crazy record he's amassed for himself. His fighting style is amazing, and he's taken home 6 win bonuses in 10 fights under the UFC. His stats are amazing, and this guy just seems like he has what it takes to defeat the extremely dangerous Petr Yan. Let's not forget that the fight at UFC 280 is going to be 3 rounds. Petr Yan hasn't been in a 3-round fight since 2020, and we know the basic approach to a 3-round fight is totally different from that of 5 rounds. All either fighter needs to do is control the first 2 rounds and beat the clock in the third. That's it. That right there might be Sugar Sean's game plan to defeat Yan and ultimately earn a title shot against Aljamain Sterling or TJ Dillashaw. And this isn't us forcing our opinion down your throat. It's the same scenario that's currently playing out against the middleweight division with Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira is scheduled to face Israel Adesanya for the UFC middleweight championship at UFC 281, with only 3 fights in the promotion. But don't get it wrong, it's not about how many fights you have or who's ranked where. It's about how the UFC is completely changing the game. Like we said earlier, these guys are redefining the way they matchmake fights. And it's brilliant. If you were never interested in Charles Oliveira facing Islam Makhachev, you most probably are right now. Seeing the whole hype surrounding the fight and the ruthless record they've both kept, you really can't deny the fact that it's like a dream matchup. The same goes for the Suga Sean vs Petr Yan fight. It sounds completely insane when you think about it the first time, but on a second thought, you'd come to realize that it's not that bad after all. Okay, pause. We've been dabbling in speculation and what-ifs all this time. Let's now talk about the real business. How's the fight gonna go? The first thing you need to know is that both fighters are excellent on their feet. Their striking is impeccable, but there's a difference. Petr Yan can kick a man into a wheelchair. No jokes, his leg kicks are that good. It's like getting hit with a baseball bat or something. If you roll back the tapes to the Jose Aldo Petr Yan fight at UFC 251, you'd get a glimpse of how Yan deals with a fighter who has an equal or even greater strike power than he does. Aldo crushed Yan's legs in that fight. He kept landing those sharp leg kicks, and Yan didn't seem to have an answer for the Brazilian. But somewhere in between the fight, we saw Yan check one of Aldo's kicks, and in the process do damage to Aldo's shin. The point we're driving at is, Petr Yan is not new to a stand-up fight, and Sean is one hard fighter to get past, believe it or not. He might be ranked 12th in the division, but that doesn't mean anything right now. Another thing we know is that Yan is definitely going to hurt his legs. And we mean really bad. The chances of this fight going to the ground are low, but you can't really count it out. And sitting across the room, with his arms folded and his legs crossed, is Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera is currently the number 5 ranked bantamweight in the UFC, and the only guy to ever defeat Suga Sean O'Malley. Now Marlon Vera said in an interview that he hopes the UFC doesn't skip him to give Suga Sean O'Malley a title shot if he defeats Petr Yan. And Marlon is in his full right to say that. He's on a 4-fight win streak, getting wins over Frankie Edgar and Dominic Cruz, 2 of the baddest fighters in the division. He also deserves to get a title shot against the winner in the Sterling Dillashaw title fight. So on one side there's Suga Sean, on the other there's Petr Yan. And next to the whole drama, there's Marlon Vera. There's a lot of factors to consider in this fight. Maybe O'Malley gets humbled by Yan. Maybe he doesn't even make it past the first round. And maybe you don't give this video a thumbs up for some reason, which we highly recommend you do. And subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next video, which is definitely going to have more juicy stories. But one thing is certain, come Saturday, October 22nd, 2022, at the Etihad Arena, Abu Dhabi, one man is going to walk out of that octagon a winner. Who will it be? Suga Sean O'Malley or Petr Yan? Let us know your pick in the comments section below. You should check out this video showing on your screen. It's way more awesome. So click on it, and I'll see you there.